The words north node and south node or nodal axis are thrown around a lot in astrology, but what exactly do they refer to? And what exactly do they mean in your chart? In this video, I'm going to explain why the nodes of the moon mean what they do and how they can show up in your chart. So make sure you watch this whole video so that we get a foundational understanding before we get into the individual chart delineations. I'm Marin, a professional astrologer, author, and current philosophy and psychology student practicing a synthesis of traditional Hellenistic astrology and modern psychological counseling dynamics to provide grounded spiritual guidance. I'm particularly excited to talk about this in today's video because the north and south node of the moon have been a huge focus for my basically lifelong study of astrology. I have my sun conjunct the north node, and I recently took even another course just to get another perspective and learn even more about the really rooted ancient perspective on this concept, because I love teaching on them and I love learning all I can as I teach. If you are excited to hear all of this, make sure you do like and subscribe and hit the post notification bell so that you never miss what the stars have in store for you. And before we get started, this video is actually brought to you by Rashi Collective. Rashi is my newly launched platform. It is a spiritual website connecting metaphysical practitioners with their ideal clients. So for example, if you are a tarot reader in Los Angeles, you can post your services and anyone looking for that can find it. Or if you are someone interested in finding a virtual Reiki healer, you can also find that at Rashi. So we're connecting spiritual healers with their ideal clients and grounding the woo. All the information and link is down below for you to check out and post your services or find what energetic needs you want to get filled. So first off, we will start with the astronomy of what nodes refer to. Every moon and planet have nodes because the nodal axis is where that body's orbit intersects with the sun's orbit around the ecliptic. The nodal axis of the moon then is where the moon's orbit around the Earth intersects with the sun's orbit around the ecliptic. The north node, also referred to as Rahu, and the south node, also referred to as Ketu, aren't planets, they're points, so they can't actually make aspects to other planets. For example, the north node cannot trine something, like by the doctrine of an aspect being casting a ray. It simply can't form that kind of association with a planet when it's a different kind of body, though they can be conjunct planets because conjunctions aren't actually aspects in the sense of traditional aspect theory. They're a different concept. It's important to note that the north and the south node of the moon have no body in this axis. They're stomachless. They can't digest food, and therefore they're illusory or shadow planets. In traditional Vedic or Indian astrology, there's a myth around Rahu and Ketu, and the myth was that this dragon tried to drink the nectar of immortality that the planets all had because they're immortal, but this dragon was caught and cut in half, resulting in the head of the dragon Rahu and the tail of the dragon Ketu. In traditional Hellenistic astrology, which is more similar to traditional Vedic astrology than modern psychological astrology, there didn't really have a huge focus on the nodes of the moon, or at least the surviving texts that we have today don't demonstrate that. However, they do still relate Rahu, the head of the dragon, with increase, and Ketu, the tail of the dragon, with decrease, both in a malefic sense. In modern evolutionary and psychological astrology of the 20th century, things definitely took a very different turn. There's astrologers who popularized saying that the south node is the bottle and the north node is the meeting, like AA or solving your addiction, or that the south node is what we need to move away from and the north node is what we need to evolve into. And a lot of the reason for these interpretations just stems from the fact that they didn't have access to these ancient texts. A lot of what we're knowing today and reading was recently translated within the past 10 to 20 to 30 years. So a lot of the 19th and 20th century findings around this came from not rooted in understanding where they were coming off of, basically. The modern paradigm separates the two into what we're evolving out of into what we're evolving into, which is really different from any ancient perspectives. I'm not just arbitrarily saying that because it was said that it must be doctrine, but I do think that the modern interpretations stem from an obsession with progress of today, whereas the older understandings resonate more with the astronomy and the inherent understandings for what these shadow planets are. So let's get into what they mean without the prescriptives of evolution or whatever. Rahu, or the North Node, represents increase, inflation, or exaggeration as the head of the dragon. It is not what we need to evolve into or explore. It is what we need to be wary of over-consuming. It can also indicate futuristic developments or brash destruction of current institutions. Ketu represents decrease, deflation, or release. It's not what we need to let go of or forget. It's what we need to be wary of escaping into. It can also indicate spirituality, reverence for the past, or mysticism. They are an inseparable karmic cycle that we have to be mindful of our patterning towards. One is not good or bad, even though they are malefic in the sense of their intensity. They're just what we have to be aware of. Rahu as increase and Ketu as decrease in a really dramatic sense. A metaphor from a teacher of mine that I heard and love is that Rahu is the punk rocker who really cares about what he looks like and his image and being super over the top in the perfect articulated way, whereas Ketu is the emo rocker who really does not give a shit about what he looks like he's just trying to be as I don't care as possible in a very different way. So further extrapolating in a chart what they're referring to, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the notion of past lives. So if that doesn't resonate with you, I mean, fill in the blank with something else, but I mean, we're gonna talk about past lives. The North Node is what we need to be aware of overpoweringly craving because we have not yet attained it in a past life. And by past life, I mean, I could do a whole video on this, but it's less about like you literally being in that past life and more as a part of your consciousness is comprised of elements of that past life, if that makes sense. I think this sense in modern astrology of evolving toward is a distorted view of this insatiable desire to possess. The South Node is what we must be wary of relapsing into because we have learned how to cope using that in a past life. I think the modern sense of having to let go of it is a distorted view of what can be a healthy integration of past tendencies. They are generally said to be malefic influences simply because of their overwhelming karmic influence. This can lead to immense suffering on one part of the node to the other if not checked with their other half, which is why I think it can be harmful to give specific advice to someone to go after their North Node. For me, in my very first reading when I was like a little preteen, first thing I was told straight out the gate was that with my Sun conjunct the North Node, I'm here to 100% be me and develop my ego. Frankly, I have quite the outspoken ego, and I now understand that my true lesson is to find strength in my being without needing to impose my presence onto others, which thankfully I kind of got a hold of needing to do before I heard that laughable advice. To someone with a Virgo North Node Sun conjunction, also within a degree of Regulus out of sign, in the 9th house of basically authority and religion and God, like if you're gonna tell me I'm here to be God, like I'm gonna run with it. But I could tell pretty early on that that was an unhealthy development of what my egoic lesson was asking for. So with an understanding now of what the basic resonance of the nodes is, we'll get into the nodes through the houses. So if you do not know what the astrological houses are. Let me know down below if you would like a full video on that, because I really would like to understand or explain some of these basic concepts so that you can better understand them. Otherwise, if you do know your chart, cool. If not, you can pull up your chart at astro.com down below and see where these nodes are falling in your whole sign houses. I will be doing this based on whole sign houses. I won't be doing them through the signs in this video, because doing them through the signs would be way too nuanced for what I feel comfortable putting out. Because I just wouldn't want to rush it or not do it justice for what is definitely a bit more complicated than just the houses. So do let me know down below if you would also like a full video on the nodes through the signs. The houses in astrology provide context for the areas of life. So I'm going to run through the nodes through the houses as an axis, starting with the north node in the first house and the south node in the seventh house. This could indicate an insatiable desire to fulfill a sense of self or gain notoriety around your physical body, while having a tendency to depend on relationships as a support system in your life. On the other side, the north node in the seventh house and the south node in the first house could indicate an obsession with the newness of relationships, or of getting through as many relationships as possible, or of over idealizing relationships, while being very used to depending solely on yourself and your physical body. For north node in the second house and south node in the eighth house, there could be an insatiable hunger towards finances, making your name through possessions and having, whereas you know very well how to depend on others and kind of almost like leech off of others' resources. Whereas the north node in the eighth house and the south node in the second house might be obsessed with getting needs of others, or with combining assets with another person to fulfill joint intimate bonds, whereas you're very good at making an abundance of money on your own, or owning and possessing things based on your own skills. North node in the third house and south node in the ninth house could indicate that you are really into learning all you can in your immediate environment, writing, communicating, or undergoing something with siblings, whereas you are very much aware of the larger intricacies, the more big picture ideas, or you are very well traveled on like a spiritual past life basis and you're not as into that this time around. Whereas the north node in the ninth house and the south node in the third house can indicate an insatiable desire towards gaining authority, gaining higher knowledge, or gaining a position, whereas the south node in the third could indicate that you already really understand details and the way to interact and communicate on a short-term basis, and you can depend on communication as a crutch when you feel the need to validate yourself. The north node in the fourth house and south node in the 10th house could indicate a drive to make a name for yourself in your home or your family, and really prioritize like being the stay-at-home parent or building a family at all costs, whereas you're very good at these ingrained lessons of public image and career already, whereas the north node in the 10th house and south node in the 4th house can indicate this really inescapable desire to have all of the career and the fame and the worldly things, because you already understand the fulfillment of home and family, and you're not super fazed by what you know you've created already in the roots of your life. Then the north node in the 5th house and south node in the 11th house could be an insatiability towards pleasures in your life, such as children, gambling, or art. There could be this desire to get all of those things because you're not super experienced in them, whereas you are very familiar with the support systems of networking and friends in your life, and therefore tend not to think twice about that support system. The north node in the 11th house and south node in the 5th house could deal with being obsessed with becoming friends or building networking with those around you and getting to a position of authority in a network or organization context, whereas you already understand a lot about children, sex, or creativity in your life, and those things just kind of always work out for you, and you're very used to doing what you can with those resources. The north node then in the 6th house and south node in the 12th house could deal with really obsessing over day-to-day routine, health, perfecting affecting your physical body or routine, or also dominating coworkers and subordinates around you, whereas you're very used to being by yourself or self-isolating to gain spiritual insights. And conversely, the North Node in the 12th house and South Node in the 6th house could be you obsessed or insatiable around analyzing yourself psychologically, getting to the bottom of really deep spiritual esoteric truths, because you're very used to and good at the worldly things you need to do, like take care of your physical body, interact with coworkers, or take into account what your day-to-day errands are. So overall, my advice for everyone is just to understand this cycle of hungering for your North Node through infantile insatiability and your escapist dependence on your South Node. Even if it's familiar discomfort, or if it's conducive, because these can be already kind of innately ingrained in a healthy or unhealthy way depending on other factors. But overall, simply viewing them as that cycle that balances out based on awareness and integration, not through evolving or letting go necessarily. And I actually have 2 tattoos commemorating Rahu because I definitely resonate with the archetype. One of them is this dragon here, and the other is a snake with the Rahu symbol on my ankle. You can find them on my Instagram if you're curious. So let me know your story down below with how you feel about the nodes, your placements, or what you are used to looking the nodes at as in your chart. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and hit post notes if you have not already. Check out all my private readings down below. I would love to read for you. I'm sending much love, and I will see you in the next video.